In this world or environment of ever-increasing competition and the different organisations out there who are offering services in relation to, whether it be a martial art based self-defence program, whether it be a sport type program adapting to the street environment, or whether it be a reality based system that's being adapted from different traditional styles and from different combatives programs. One thing that is hard for those of us with organisations that develop our own tactics, or we develop our own skill sets, is that we don't create anything new. Nobody really creates anything new. What we do is we look at it from different angles, different ideas, different ideologies and different philosophies, and we basically work around what we believe will work for individuals based on our experience and based on our education process through self-learning, whether it be through other martial arts or other combative skills that we've learnt ourselves, or whether it be through reality, basically learning on the job, as they say. With MDTA, a lot of what we have is based predominantly on the physiology and the psychology of violence and the realities of violence. A lot of the techniques and systems put in place are through my years of learning through other martial arts styles, through other combative systems and through other reality-based systems and techniques and applications, as well as developing skill sets based on my industry background and my experience working as a covert operative, working as a bodyguard, whether it be in the entertainment industry or whether it be corporate, all the way through to my tactical operations training that is delivered to law enforcement and security personnel, not only in Australia but internationally. And basically developing skill sets and techniques based on what I've seen and experienced throughout my professional history or professional career within tactical operations and within combatives. That is also including the reality of the physiology and the psychology of violence. So there are a lot of good programs out there, there are a lot of good systems, there are a lot of good instructors. The only thing that I always say is when you are looking at getting involved in a reality-based self-defence program, whether it be for a seminar or a workshop, or as a long-term training program where you attend weekly, is always make sure of the background and the experience of that particular individual. Make sure that they have some sort of certification and recognition. Make sure that that certification and recognition is backed by some known organisation or known authority within those environments. For instance, if we take MDTA myself, we make sure that we have the backing and recognised by different martial art organisations for the side of the martial art application, as well as making sure that we have the background, the recognition and the certification within real known and registered and recognised combat associations. I myself have certification in the areas of military combatives as well as international police tactics. I have certifications and registrations in different areas. I'm a licensed bodyguard. I'm a licensed security professional in security operations level 2 and level 3 with that bodyguard component. I have a history and background and experience of working on the front line overseas in some of the most high-risk environments. So these are the type of things that, not to say that you have to come along to MDTA, you may find another organisation out there that is offering high level of training. Just make sure that you do research and look into the background of not only the individual but the type of people that are involved and who recognises the individual and recognises their system. Once we pull all that into play, you really need to look at what that system has been developed for, what its philosophy is, what its ideology is, and basically what its concept is. What are they looking at teaching you? Are you learning the skills in regards to being deployed for a combative role or a high-risk environment, dealing in specialist operations overseas, or are you looking at just basically some survival skills that we may need to use in a urban environment, basically the skills that we need in everyday life, because society is unfortunately getting a little bit more violent and getting a little bit more to the point where we need to have some sort of reality-based street defensive tactics to be able to deal with the violence that's going on out there, whether it be against armed attacks, whether it be knife, firearm, people coming at you with all sorts of different types of weapons, road rage. There are so many things now that we face out there basically in the everyday environment that we need to look at what it is we're trying to learn. In other words, there's no point going out and learning high-level combative skills for a military type environment or for a special operation type environment if you're never going to face that. Because what you'll find is you may learn skills and learn at a level that if you were to deploy or use those tactics and skills out in an urban environment, you're going to find that you're probably going to be done for assault and if not end up in jail because you have not worked within the guidelines that is allowable for a citizen when it comes to the use of force, as opposed to the type of tactics you're going to use on a life versus life type application in a high risk environment. They are two totally different environments. I know with MDTA we train law enforcement and we train military personnel in the aspects of the use of force continuum based on their industry and based on the environments. When we're looking at the skill set required for an urban environment or for the average civilian who's looking after themselves in the way of what we call self-defense, or what I prefer to call self-preservation and self-protection, is we've got to understand that we need to be able to use everything that we've got in our power to try and de-escalate and negotiate, to be able to use what we call ACT systems or assertive control techniques to be able to deal with a confrontation or aggressive situation before we revert straight to basically hammering into somebody and finding that we're the ones then put up on an assault charge. Keeping in mind that we need to be trained in the areas of assessing intent. Because it's going to depend on the type of intent, will then depend on how we apply our defensive tactics to be able to deal with that intent. So you need to make sure that whatever training you get, that you are working within the law and that the person that is instructing you based on the environments you're going to face and making sure you have a full understanding of the concepts, the tactics and the strategies involved, that if you are confronted or anger turns to aggression and you've got to deal with a threat, that you understand within the law what it is that you're allowed to do. And once again, if we don't have a full understanding of that side of it, then realistically you could be learning or being trained in something which is going to end up putting you on the wrong side of the law. Now, we've all heard the saying, and I must admit I do agree with this, that at the end of the day we want to make sure we're the ones that are surviving and standing, so then we get that chance to argue our case in a court if that be the case. The saying, and I might not get this correct, but the saying is, I'd rather be judged by 12 than buried by 6. Basically, I understand and I believe that concept, but that doesn't mean that we can't have training that will develop primal systems to be able to deal with self-protection and self-preservation still working within the law. In other words, there are times when we can de-escalate and negotiate if we've been taught those skills, whether it be verbal, whether it be a physical or the physical component, to be able to try and de-escalate and negotiate. And if not, if we need to, is be able to up that level to use what we call in MDTA as a reinforcement of our assertive control, to be able to still deal with that person on a level where you're showing them that you are going to take action to deal with them in relation to the situation, and then have what we call active threat control, which is then utilising and deploying defensive tactics, basically, in other words, using a reality-based gross motor skill, whether it be striking or defending yourself, to stop a real and impending threat. The problem is too many times, as I say, we have people who will learn a lot through YouTube and that type of thing, which is seeing the high end, but they're not fully understanding the implications or legal implications of what happens if we use those tactics. Take, for instance, I'll use an example, is in an MDTA civilian class that we run, the classes that we run every week, is the applications, the physiology and the psychology of violence that I train in those environments is adaptive to the street environment. In other words, I still talk about the need to use what force is necessary to stop a real and impending threat and to be able to deal with that violence versus violence to make sure you're the one that survives, but we still talk about it and deal with it in regards to the application of the law. Okay, and the use of force and what we're allowed to do, and that we're not using excessive force, and that we're not putting ourselves in a situation where we're actually provoking the violence. because a lot of the time that's what happens, is where we could use de-escalation and negotiation skills through, as I say, body language, through verbal communication, is we've got to also make sure that we're not actually then trying to cause the situation to escalate through simply not having the right verbal tactics or having the right body language to try and deal with it in the first place. Keeping in mind, once again, it depends on the intent. If somebody's already coming at you with that full intent of telling you what they're going to do to you, and they're going to destroy you, kill you, whatever they're going to do, is you need to meet that as soon as possible, hit hard, hit first, finish the threat as quick as possible and get out of there. I 100% believe in that, and I 100% know that that is the only effective method to deal with a real and impending threat that you know is happening there and then. But if you just have got somebody who is all mouth and has no intention of becoming physical, and all of a sudden you go through with that same application and you simply destroy them there on the spot, you've got a harder case to answer for yourself when you do stand in front of in a court environment. So you need to be able to work within dealing with your own fear and adrenaline in those situations, but you need to be able to adapt and work within the law no matter what the situation and what the environment. Somebody who trains hard and somebody who trains well in just the physical, it's not going to be enough to deal with real life environments. Reality-based self-defense has to have the physiology and the psychology of dealing with aggression and violent encounters. In other words, you have to have all the components of being able to work out how to de-escalate and negotiate, how to be able to use your body language, how to be able to use your verbal skills to try and talk somebody down, to try and be able to negotiate and deal with an encounter and try and stop it from escalating into something which solves nothing. Violence solves nothing. There are many professionals out there who have gone through years and years in the reality-based self-defense industry, who have worked on the streets, who have worked as bouncers, who have worked overseas, who have worked in high-risk environments, that will tell you that we know that we can build a skill set to give us the best possible chance to survive, but at the end of the day, violence solves nothing. Although I've spent my life trying to develop and create an awareness and fully understand the physiology and psychology of violence, one thing I can assure you, it still doesn't answer anything. It's still, violence is not an answer to anything, and I wish there wasn't such thing as violence. The unfortunate part is sometimes good people have to do, you know, not nice things, and that means that we need to learn to be able to use physical violence ourselves sometimes to survive an encounter. But what I'm saying is, if we can learn to use other skills to de-escalate and negotiate, that should be our first priority. If that doesn't work and we need to resort to the physical component of being able to deal with something to meet that force and take it one step above to be able to stop a real and impending threat so we can get out of there, so we can get back to our families, and we be the ones that at the end of the day is not ending up in hospital or even worse, then I still believe wholeheartedly in that if you need to meet violence with violence, you're going to have to come in and destroy that threat and stop it however you can. But you need to understand and fully respect the environment you're in and understand the law.